Hello, Wilders, and welcome to today's AMA on the WILDER proposal. Quick shout out to Mighty Wilder Kai and Tankator from Team Burnout for their awesome intro song that won part of the WIFA contest earlier this year. WILDER proposal is an important step in activating MEOW with the launch of our next major game release by swapping 80% of the current ETH holdings within the WILDER DAO for WILD. The WILD will come from the WILD Treasury and will be swapped directly with the WILDER DAO itself. This move aims to bolster WildWorld's growing economy by supporting in-game rewards for Wheels gameplay and enabling Wheels industry staking. The proposal has sparked a lot of discussion and raised some very important questions within the community, but today the artist and the architect are here to provide clarity and answer your questions. Hello, Frank and Neo, how are you guys doing today?
Yeah, awesome. Great to be here.
Hey, what's up? Yeah, stoked to be here.
Nice. Well, we really appreciate you being here today. The Wilders have been submitting their questions via a type form, and the community team has been collecting questions in the Discord chats. So let's start the discussion by addressing the 3 most frequently asked questions before opening the floor. If anyone would like to join the discussion with Frank and Neo, please raise your hand and I'll bring you up on stage. If you're unable to speak, feel free to type your question or comment in the chat box for me to read out. So the most frequently asked question was around how you guys came to the decision of choosing 80% and if the remaining funds are sufficient for their intended purpose. So Frank, Neo, can you please shed some light on the rationale behind the decision of choosing 80%? Are we confident that the remaining 20% will be enough to sustain development? And if so, how long do you anticipate it lasting for?
Do you want to maybe answer that one, Frank, as you help?
Yeah. So in putting together the proposal, we consulted some community members, which we mentioned. Super grateful to have the feedback and just engagement there. And that primarily came through, just discussion. And so it ultimately came from, talking with the key people who helped us put the proposal together. And from there, that was how it shaped up. I'm not sure if you want to add anything, Neil.
Yeah, I think the rationale is just kind of like hedge a bit and leave some in there. So you're not taking you're not going 100% wild. So there's just some like a small amount of diversification in the holdings for the DAO.
Nice. Okay. Does anyone have any comments or questions relating to this question? Please raise your hand. If so, now's your time to speak. If not, we can move on to the next question. All right. So let's move on then to question number 2, which was about the structure of Wheels DAO and Wild World DAOs in general. Some have commented that Genesis DAOs are meant to hold the main governing power, but that this proposal felt as if it was going against that. Some felt that it was rushed with a quorum considered low at 3%. Can you please explain the structure and reasoning here and comment on why we're not yet fully decentralized in our DAO operations?
Yeah, so I think when we proposed this, I think if you go on the Zine, you'll see some of the early posts where the idea was to progressively decentralize over time. So there's some elements that are centralized, there's some elements that are decentralized. This was definitely, I think, a step towards more decentralization because managed everything through proposal, and a lot of these things haven't been set. The quorum hasn't been set. It was just the initial configuration that we chose. There's other things like that were just kind of set by the project when we set this stuff up. And so if people are passionate about that, for instance, if the quorum should be 5% or 10%, I think one of the challenges I'll just finish that point. So that point is if people are passionate about something, I don't really see that as not being decentralized because it's just operating based on how it was set up. And if people want to change that, it's like, hey, write a proposal, corral people around why you think it should be a different percentage and have at her kind of thing. So that process exists right now where people can do that. The quorum being low, I think it's not really clear how many people are active, how many people are actively in the Discord, how many people are following the proposal. I think we ended up getting, how many people are willing to vote and go through the time and energy and read the proposal and all that type of stuff. So we just had no way of having any data on that. So I think we were pretty surprised with the participation, which was really cool. And I think it's like we definitely want to do. I hope that this kind of sparks people wanting to do more things and coming up with more ideas. And yeah, so that's basically that. Like we're kind of just getting moving with the DAOs. It's just kind of the time where it's now really going to we're going to be able to start participating and whatnot. And I think Land DAO at some point we should talk about. But I'd love to explain the tech of like the new DAO system that we have that Land is using, which is 100% decentralized. There's no multi-sig, there's no signers, there's no intermediaries. Like if something goes wrong, like nothing can be changed without the power of the DAO. But it took us several years to basically build that technology out on the Zero side, and we haven't talked about that a lot. I think that's super exciting. Whereas the existing DAOs, they were using our Zero app. That you can go to app.wilderworld.com and you can see the DAOs there, but that's primarily an interface using some of the different technology. The new stuff is, it is like 100% decentralized effectively, like which is exciting.
I think that said too, there was actually a good amount of participation, over 10% it looks like, so that we were happy to see and primarily favorable.
I know there was a lot of discussion here. Does anyone want to jump on stage? We have Dizzy. I know you had a few comments here. Barry Bieber. Is Barry Bieber in the crowd? All right. Well, let's move on to the final most popular question, which was related to funding. You both touched on this in Discord, but many of the community members didn't see that conversation, and it's still a very popular question. Can you please touch on how the Wheels game has been funded to date and how the team intended to fund the game before creating this proposal?
Yeah, it was always intended, like if you look at the original Metropolis Zine post, it says very clearly that the intention is that the profits generated go to the DAO holders, but there is expenses that the DAO is intended, the DAO exists to basically fund that industry. To me, it's pretty clearly written that was the case, and to me, that's always been the case. We just honestly never got around to it. I mean, we just never got around to doing it. It was something that we were going to do before, and quite honestly, like what we should have done. But again, I think we were trying to be generous. We didn't chart. The DAO's not funding anything as it stands right now. Like nothing. Like they're getting wild in exchange for ETH basically. So it's a swap. In reality, the DAO is still not funding. The DAO still hasn't funded anything because. So I think there's a little bit of a misconception there where the deal was, the DAO's gonna, like the wheels industry we're building. There's been massive expenses just on the actual agreement with Epic, because Wheels was our first big collection. Wheels generated a significant amount of revenue. We had to pay Epic, I think, around $1.1 million, pretty much direct, as a result of selling those.
Anything that ends up in the game.
Yeah.
As an asset, that's an NFT. There's a royalty on over a certain amount of. So how Epic's business model works is it's a free piece of software. Once you've sold over $1 million of either that title or in-game assets, they charge you a percentage on all of those assets, essentially.
Yeah, so that's just an example. Like that's like $1 million, not even including any development or any energy, and getting Wheels, getting the driving physics. I mean, a lot of the investment so far has gone into that. So from my perspective, it would be totally reasonable to say, okay, well, all of that money went to fund the game, but, we recognize that, and we would have just basically sent the invoices, but, we recognize that, we're figuring all this stuff out, and that was the first collection, and the prices, have gone down from when the mint happened and all these types of things. So our thinking was just, okay, well, we'll just do it as a swap, and then it's a positive for people, and then they're getting wild at like historically low prices. We wouldn't, I think that's the other thing that people don't realize is, let's say you wanted to buy $10 million of Wild right now, we wouldn't sell it because we think the price is too low. So we might sell it at $5 or $10, but we're not going to sell, there might be a small amount that we'd be willing to sell at this price, but we're not going to sell any meaningful amount at this price. And this is a meaningful deal in terms of like, this makes the Wheels holder, this makes the Wheels DAO a significant Wild holder and a significant Wild stakeholder, which we thought was pretty cool, because now we're like, okay, well, we're going to have these different DAOs, you have these different industries starting to form, and that kind of is decentralization, where you have, it's not like this one locus of control. You have these different groups that have different interests and are coordinating and working together to build this thing, and that's pretty cool. So we also thought that was kind of neat. Like if there's a group that we want to have holding a large amount of wild, like we'd much prefer it's like the Wheels DAO and the community, rather than like a venture capitalist, for instance, that's buying such a large percentage at this price, basically. So it made sense on a lot of those levels.
And yeah, not to mention kind of getting into land and metropolis and all these types of things. It actually starts to give us a model where there is like faucets and sinks. It's going to be a process in figuring that out. It also really unlocks that with the new chain coming and Mumid and all these sorts of things. So it feels timely there from that perspective.
For sure, that makes a lot of sense. Thank
Yeah,
you.
there's a lot, actually, as we start talking about it. There's been a lot of consideration. I can tell you our accounting team was like, like our CFO for years has been like, WTF, like why haven't you, why haven't we worked to do this sooner? Like that's, you know what I mean? But we wanted to get it done before this bull run comes, but then also we honestly have just been so busy with everything else that it wasn't super high on the priority list.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize just how much has been spent so far in the game. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, well, we do have some more questions that came in by the type form, but I'd like to open up the floor for anyone in the audience. If you have any questions at all related to the proposal, please raise your hand. If not, I can just read out some more questions. All right, I can see Dizzy has his hand raised. Invited you up, Dizzy. Welcome to the stage.
Yeah, Dizzy.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey.
What's up? How's it going?
I'm a little sick right now. Kind of
Howdy.
Casper summoned me out of bed. I was listening. On
Oh, I'm sorry. Hope you
it's
feel better
all good.
soon.
No, I'll get by it. I think it's just like yeah, just something a little going on, but it's all good. My question wasn't actually, I guess, 100% directly related to the proposal itself, but I kind of had a couple questions. One of them was one that just kind of come up in what you're talking about with the Epic Game Store costs, and I actually never really thought about the in-game item aspect of it and the costs involved there. Is that going to be ongoing future costs that the DAO is going to have to deal with in the future, or like how do you guys see that playing out, I guess?
Yeah, so anytime so the deal with Epic, we were able to buy you have to basically pay a percentage of virtual assets you sell if it was developed using their engine. So that's how they make money. You can just go download Unreal for free, like Frank said. So they have a kind of interesting business model where, if you're a small studio or whatever, it's kind of free, but if you start to generate a lot of revenue, you actually have to pay quite a lot. We've bought the royalty down to, I think, 1.5%. Everything that we sell, if it's made with Unreal, or if it ends up in the game. So like merch wouldn't maybe be like that unless it was, or if it was something, but pretty much everything we're building is inside Wilder World. So we have to pay 1.5%. So what that would mean is, let's say the Wheels does a new collection, well, they would pay 1.5% of that. The value of that collection would go to Epic, basically. Royalties that we generate, so all those royalties that we generate every quarter, we have to send a report to Epic with what the royalties were, and we have to pay 1% of that across all the industries. And we've been doing that on behalf of the DAOs, and there's quite a bit of administration and legal and accounting and all of that type of stuff. Like it's a real nightmare, basically. That's pretty much what it is. It's not that bad because like it was 5%, and through the process we were able to buy it down to 1.5%. So, but it means if we sell for every $1 million we sell, 1% of $1 million is $10,000. So it's $15,000. So for every $1 million we sell, it's basically going to be $15,000.
How do you see that being managed, though, in the future by a decentralized DAO? Like you kind of mentioned, there's a lot of administration and this and that. Like, do you guys have long-term plans as like how you kind of envision that actually working?
Well, you want to automate. What we'd want to do is just automate it so that there's a smart and they don't have any of this stuff, and they just look at us like deer in headlights when we talk about it.
Yeah.
We did even say to them, we're like, hey, we're willing to build you this Web3 piping because you guys are going to need it, and we'll build it for you for free kind of thing. And they didn't I don't think they understood it, to be honest. They're just like, give us our,
They don't see the value. Yeah,
they just
want
want their
money.
percentage.
Yeah.
So the simplest way to deal with it from an accounting perspective is to just set them up a wallet, set it up on chain, like royalties come into an intermediary contract, and then they get split basically. Some goes to the Wilder World DAO, some goes to the Wilder Wheels DAO, and then Epic takes their like 1.5% off the top. And then that would still need to be like, that needs to be converted to cash, and there needs to be a bank account and all of that. But in theory, like, the DAO could contract with Wilder World or somebody else to do that. There's a huge legal liability, so there's obviously an incentive for us to deal with it and do it properly. Yeah, I think that would simplify it a lot. And so where then it's pretty simple and it's pretty transparent on the blockchain of what's going where kind of thing. There is still the matter of, though, like building the actual game, which is probably even a bigger challenge. And at some point, we're going to have to figure out how the DAOs are not only generating revenue, but also they have to pay revenue. And that's just, you know what I mean? That's just having a business. So I think people, it's easy to want all the benefits of having a DAO, which is ownership and upside and all this other sort of stuff, but not the things that actually go hand in hand with making a business successful. So I do think I am like less confident in DAOs, I would say, just in general, through talking to a lot of other community members, people that have been part of DAOs. There's a lot of challenges with them because it's such a new type of thing. And so I think the tech is really cool, but the social technology, which is like the human technology, right? Like it's like humans getting good at coordinating and collaborating. It's like, I mean, it's just brutal. If you read any business book or any entrepreneurial story, I mean, it's pretty much just brutal. Anybody that's very successful, the challenges associated with building something. So I think we have to figure out collectively, really what the DAOs, what is the highest good that the DAOs can provide, and where do people want to participate, and how do we want them to work on a more practical level? Because I think technically we have the technology there now, but there's still a lot to figure out in terms of, future collections with wheels, expenses, game modes. Does it, the original intention was that it would kind of like spin off and, be its own, all these DAOs would be their own kind of games, and they'd have their own teams, and that is happening, but it's happening within a company currently. There's just a ridiculous amount of coordination and changing plans, and you guys see some of it, but inside it's like, it's pretty intense. So how would it work? What would work to do within the context of DAO? What wouldn't work? And how do we not have it?
It's always like a really, really tough thing. Like you said, a DAO in theory sounds awesome. We all want to have ownership. And I've seen it in most of the ones that I'm a part of, is that it's usually still a top-down situation where you have a lot of holders that aren't necessarily that active. Like you said, 10%, and that's a good number. I think, when you look at it from like a certain angle, but at the same time, like you still have 10% of the items, is probably what, 5% of the holders. I don't know what the actual number is there. I'm just kind of throwing something out there, but you're always going to have like that small majority, say large holders or more active people that are going to go vote on these things. But then are they going to also act on the execution side, or are they just going to vote and say, well, I've got 100 wheels and this is what I want to vote on? Do those same holders, put in that time to make these things happen, or are they just going to vote and step away? Something else, like I was kind of curious about, and I don't know how much or if this would ever apply at all to like the industry DAOs, but something that you talked about, like what way back was, like the social credit type of system where people would be able to earn like a certain amount of voting power or something along those lines in the DAOs, to where it was more of like a point system or a timing system than a direct like correlated to items, like, that you hold. And I'm kind of curious, like, if you guys ever see that as being part of the industry DAOs, or like kind of where you're going there.
Yeah, so we do have ZBI, which was zero basic income, which is now kind of MMID, and that system's, we've just paused it, or we've lowered the rewards quite significantly as we get ready for this new system to roll out. But obviously that system is working, which is pretty cool. And so that's kind of like money going out. And then we have one of the huge problems we had with both Wilder and Zero was bots and was also like win trading and all this other stuff that happened. So, and like that's exactly why we did this test in terms of both Zero rewards and Wild rewards, was to just really understand like how's this going to work, and what are all the gotchas. And what we've basically discovered is, which is kind of like we anticipated, but it was, I think, more prevalent than we realized, is anytime you start to introduce money or decision making or anything like this, you need like really resilient systems. So there's two ways I'd look at it. So one is just, how do you reduce bad outcomes from happening? Because if you're giving token out, and then that token not only comes with economic value, but it comes with voting power, and it's not given out in the right way, not only is it a bad financial decision, but it ends up being existential, because a bunch of the wrong types of people end up controlling the DAO, for instance. So that's a problem. So ZBI is sort of the money going out. The DAO is the sort of governance within, and then we have the ZXP, which is the reputation score. And the way that works is, it's basically looking at things like, do you have a ZID? Do you have a root domain or a subdomain? Do you have multiple? Have you connected your Twitter account? Do you have a profile picture? Have you connected your wallet or email? Do you hold a Trinity? Basically, the human score that we're building is all tied around, it's a number of things that you've done, or it's a number of activities. So that system is going to come out relatively soon. You'll see it when we launch the MEOW site. We're basically tying that into your MOMID. So your daily rewards will tie into all the various things that you've done in the past and all the ways in which you're participating in the ecosystem. And that sort of tells us how much of a human the person is. Not like, just is this a bot or is it a human? So that is the first part of the reputation system. That's like pretty much built, pretty much ready to go. That will be turning on soon. That's why I've been like telling people on Zero, like, hey, get a ZID, like update your profile picture, connect your email, like do all those things, because that'll give people an advantage for doing all those things. Now, that tying into, you could have something where you take the ZID score and then you times it by how much token they have or something like that. The challenge with that, the nice thing about token is it's very hard to game. Like if somebody's invested assets, it's very hard to imagine that it's a bot or something like that. So the best way to prevent these like Sybil attacks is through economic people having to purchase things. But that doesn't necessarily, that just means whether or not they're a human. That doesn't mean whether they're a good human, whether they're a smart human, whether they're a capable human, whatever. So it gets, I think, pretty tricky. So basically what I'm saying is like we got the foundation of it, and I think it's more robust than a lot of the different things out there. But then to actually build like an effective, it really comes back to what the purpose of the DAO is. I think that's what we need to figure out. Is it to provide guidance? Is it to make sure that there's transparency? Is it to, because I think I'm quite confident now the execution of whatever it is we're doing is always going to be, you're always going to want like a small team that's very efficient at doing that. You're not going to want like a big bureaucracy, basically. So I do think that that's one of the big discussions that came out of this whole thing. And yeah, we're going to want to like think about, okay, really, 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 what do the DAOs do? What do the industry DAOs do? What does the main Wilder World DAO do? And I think we figured some of this stuff out at the beginning. As I mentioned in the Zines, it's like we're going through progressive decentralization. Organization has the right to change certain things until it's fully decentralized. Like the reason we put all those prefaces in is because we knew that we'd probably get it wrong, and we wanted to kind of incrementally get there. So I think we're pretty much at that stage where it's more of a social challenge than a tech challenge, and now we have to just kind of figure out like what's the best way to. And I think the Wheels DAO is like kind of the main. It's like the first main DAO. So I do think a lot of the template will be defined within this DAO.
Yeah, I think that was you kind of touched on a little bit. I think that was part of the big kind of some of the blowback that come out of this proposal was like the prior communication was maybe like not as clear as like what the intent was there. So a lot of people felt like, oh, they're trying to take all the Ethereum out of the DAO all of a sudden, And I know that you guys had mentioned it in some of the designs like Metropolis and stuff. But even me, I didn't realize that it was going to be. I know there had been talk about. I think the number was like 50,000 initially for the Midnight in Miami rewards and stuff. I know things change and this and that. But like, I think overall, and you kind of touched on it earlier, you guys just hadn't necessarily got around to it. I know you're going a million different directions at once, but I think like a lot of like the blowback was probably just sort of a lack of communication and like misunderstanding on people's parts for the most part. This is something we kind of talked about in one of the hangout meetings that I was kind of curious about, and that I think this whole situation has kind of made me try and gather more information overall, like the overall like treasury, since these tokens are coming from the treasury. I feel like we don't have like a real clear tokenomics picture of like I don't really know the best way to word it, but just overall tokenomics of like the treasury accounts and like where things stand and kind of where you guys see that progressing. Also when you look at it, I know there was been some accounts that have been compromised. I know they were different sort of vesting accounts for early holders, or maybe I don't know if any of them are VCs or anything like that. But like, do you guys have anything in the works to try and like kind of clarify those areas so people can have a better picture of what's going on? And I understand it's hard to like build a roadmap or be forward thinking when things are always changing, but like some sort of baseline to kind of know where we're at and like what the plan is.
Yeah, like the plan related to tokenomics or just in general.
Yeah, specifically like tokenomics, so far as
So we have pretty
the
good
wild token.
We have pretty good tracking internally on that. It's gotten better over time. Like I think probably and then obviously there's like sort of big chunks now happening, like 100 million being used for land and resource generation. So that's obviously like 20% of the supply. 50+% is already out on the market. And so the foundation is sitting on, I think, about 30%. After those things are done, basically. It's like between, let's say, like 30 to 35%. I think the best thing to do there would be to probably do, when we do the economic updates on land and sort of Metropolis and the wild token economy and all the new stuff that's coming on the economy, I think the best thing that we could do is include a section on an updated tokenomics of like, hey, here's how many are on the market, here's what's vested, here's what's unvested, and here's kind of how we're intending to use the remainder of these tokens. I think we're in a really good situation there, in that a lot of projects, one mistake a lot of projects have made, even other gaming projects, is where the project, maybe they have cash, but they don't have any of their own token to sell. And then that can create a huge problem, because we do need to bring in another, I would say, our goal this cycle is to bring in between 100 and 500 million in token sales, basically, through OTC investors, different types of groups out there, and really capitalize the project for the next like 5 to 10 years. We think that opportunity exists, and we're sitting on the token, and then those tokens would obviously be locked, and people would be coming in at a high price would be the objective, or a reasonable price. So that's pretty much without going into too much more detail, like kind of high level tokenomics. It's 50 to 60% that's already in the market. The amount that was in the hack was relatively small. It was total like around $2 million. So it's not small, but like it was relatively small.
I guess
Relatively small.
Speaking.
So
I definitely appreciate that. I've been kind of curious.
We can put like an updated tokenomics, like kind of a state of the union on tokenomics, because the last tokenomics we did was.
That was something I was even asking like some of the team members, and like nobody really knew. They're like, "Oh, we don't really know the answer to this question." It's great that you guys sit down and talk with everybody.
It's pretty detailed. Internally, we have it, and we have I'd say a very good view of it. So we just need to basically provide an update. And then ideally we'd have a dashboard or something where people can just like look on a dashboard. I mean, that would be the best, because then just like go check out the dashboard. But right now it's all in, Excel basically.
I think at the end of the day, something you kind of touched on earlier is this is like historically low prices for wild. I think anyone that's kind of against this now, like next year, is going to be like, holy shit. Look where we are now. So that's just my thoughts on it. But yeah, those are like kind of my main like thinking points that I've been kind of.
Yeah, it is good. Like the other thing about having it in the DAO is it's a good place for it, basically, right? Because it gets it distributed, it gets it into people's hands indirectly, but it's not a group that's gonna like dump it, you know what I mean? And it's getting it at a good price and stuff like that. So I'm like very bullish, more bullish than I ever have been on the Wheels DAO basically, because now it's sitting on a lot of wild basically, and then we're redoing all the cars, which I know there's been a little bit of controversy around, but I just am so bullish on the new cars. Like I just think they're like, I initially wanted wheels because I was like, oh, this is cool, and you know, excited by it, in terms of the technology, in terms of the project and all that type of stuff. But I feel like for the first time, like as an actual just like consumer, I'm like, no, like I want that I want that NFT. Like not about the rarity, not about the economy, not about the fact that I can use it in game. It's just like looks freaking amazing. Frank was even joking the other day that like we want to like do reverse IP deals where like most metaverses like they bring, you know, they're going and they're looking at like, hey, bring this car into real life, but we think we are into the game, and we're like, well, we think our designs are so good, and they're all based off these original designs, which are like of the most iconic vehicles, but with more futuristic flair, that you know we could have the
It would be
reverse
copying
happen.
you
We
guys on there. Yeah.
start building these
That
cars.
that'd be awesome to have like the Lambo Wilder version.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
legendary.
but yeah, I'm obviously, yeah, we can't really talk about the price and stuff like that, but I think it's just the good news is like, you know, some of the tweets and stuff I sent recently around people reaching out for OTC and stuff. I can tell you like the level of interest that we're getting on OTC is, if people want smart capital wanting to come in and buy significant amounts of wild, is we've now at the stage where we're just like, no, basically, like we can sell a little bit basically to help with the, you know, help add more cash is always a good idea if you can take it. But we're now at the stage where we're basically turning people away. In some cases, want to put in, you know, many millions of dollars. And so I think this cycle is somewhat delayed because of all the meme coin stuff. But I also think, yeah, what people have no idea. I mean, if people have been following the project, like I don't even think the people following the project have a full, you know, I do think, I don't want to like overset expectations, but I do think like it's pretty insane what we have right now and what we're going to show. It's going to, I think, blow people's, like just completely blow people. It's blowing my mind, you know, it's blowing like Frank's mind and the team's mind, where we're just like, oh fuck, like I can't believe we built this thing. It's just insane. So it's blowing our minds, and we're obviously bullish and believe in the project. So I think once we, and then obviously marketing, there's a lot of stuff that we're doing on marketing because we know that that's been kind of our weakness in the past. We're talking to all the major exchanges, like we're doing all the right things. So I just think it's just a matter of time at this stage. And then the market has obviously not been in our favor yet, but I do think all these things are going to come together, and I think it's going to be, you know, last year will look like, or last cycle is like, you know what I mean? We didn't have anything last cycle, you know, we're just getting started. It was just a totally different thing. So I do think, yeah, like I'm just super, we're working so hard right now, but we're so fired up. It's insane. It's like that energy from, I was just talking to one of our investors, and you work in the bear market because you have to, you know, you've committed to all this stuff, you have all this responsibility to deliver, and it's just extremely painful. But that level of like real excitement of like, wow, like we built all of that stuff and we're going to be like releasing it soon is coming, and you can just feel it, and it's a different type of energy. It's not like, you know, you're having to slog through something, you start to feel the wind at your back. So I feel like we're just kind of at that moment where we're gonna get that big break, you know, within the next 3 months.
For sure, and I think the fact that, you know, we're having this call on a day that Bitcoin has set a new all-time high is, you know, let's fucking go, guys. Like, let's see this.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, you guys timed it pretty
much,
well.
Yeah.
So
love it.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
memes, like the memes are here, but I don't know. Like I love meme coins actually.
memes are cool, but you know,
Yeah,
it's a means to an end. You know, it brings people in, the gambling and the fun. You know,
yeah, like it's like, where's all that money gonna go after? And it's not gonna go to Bitcoin, because maybe some percentage of it'll go to Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's not gonna be an interesting trade in the next. You know, it will always be to some extent, but it's not going to be as volatile. Like people are going to look for that next generation of products and that next generation of innovation where they can really, they're investing in something real, they're buying something real, and there's significant upside. And I think that as a narrative, the other thing that hit us is metaverse is just not, you know, you had the biggest companies the biggest companies in the world basically touting metaverse, right? And metaverse becoming the big thing, plus NFTs and all that type of stuff. And we have none of that right now. That is 100% going to come back. Like Mark Zuckerberg hasn't stopped working on the metaverse. He's still spending, there's still whatever 5,000, 10,000 people at Meta working on the metaverse. There's Epic, there's Apple, there's so many people. It's just that the narrative has shifted to AI because things were further out than expected. But not only is gaming going to hit, metaverse will hit too. And I do think we're one of the top metaverse projects in the world, and we're relatively unknown. So it's very odd that you have this thing where it was kind of like one of the biggest things on the planet, and then it just went to absolutely nobody caring. But I actually think in the end, that's going to have been a huge advantage to us, because when that cycle does come back, we're going to be so far ahead of everybody else. And because we're a smaller team with less capital and all of that type of stuff, that'll end up being a big advantage. But my confidence is definitely, after seeing the open world and being in there and seeing it all come together, because it's kind of like you're building a house, right? 90% of the work you do at the house is building the foundation. It's planning, it's building the foundation, it's making all the decisions, and then
It's kind of like a slowly then all at once type.
Yeah. And we're in that moment too, where you can feel the compounding of years of work coming together. Like you can feel the wind at our back, and we're like, every day it's looking better and better and better and better and better. And that is a result of all of that work that we've put in for so many years, and all the capital that we've put in, and talent and all that. And you can't recreate that overnight. Like you just can't, So I'm still a big believer that, like, there's going to be a shift. Everything's going to come together at some point. There'll be some number of, like I saw Murad today saying that there's going to be millions of animal coins, millions of this, millions of that. And it's like, okay, well, like, how many of those will be $50 billion projects, right? So it's like, at the end of the day, do you want to go bet on something where you have a 1 in a million chance of some random, animal token or whatever? Or like, basically,
there can only be so many metaverses, because not only the capital, but all the resources that it goes into, time, talent, capital. So that's kind of what you mean, right?
Exactly. So
anyone can go launch an animal coin right now.
Yeah, and there's going to be millions of tokens, and there will be many, many 20, 30, 40 billion dollar meme tokens, of course. And like, yes, like, I think memes are great, and like, it's worth, like, it's pretty much like gambling, right? It's like gambling with more strategy, like there's more, like, if you're good at like meme culture and picking up trends and stuff, you can have an edge or whatever. But ultimately, it's just a means to an end. It's just gambling, right? If you want to build the future and be part of one of the biggest sort of trends, in this sort of generation, it is virtual worlds, it is virtual real estate, it is digital assets, it is all these different types of things. And that is the next frontier of crypto. It's going to move from infrastructure. It's going to move into these virtual worlds and these content, and AI is going to obviously be a big part of that. But whether we call it metaverse or not, that's where it all ends up. Like that's where this all ends. We're basically there, and nobody can see it, or some number of people can see it. Like the people in here can see it. So it's fine. You know what I mean? That's just like, you just have to kind of let that play out and stay convicted. Like, look at all the people that pivoted to AI when AI was hot, and then now they're pivoting back to their AI thing didn't work out because they got disrupted by ChatGPT or something like that, and now they're coming back to
It's
crypto,
really tough
basically.
to stay vigilant through the bear cycles, and I've been around for a while, and I see it, and it's like the ones that do are the ones that get rewarded, though. It's not the people that come back in after the hype, and I'm just like super pumped to see you guys pull back the curtain and see what all you got going on. So I'll shut up now, though, and I know other people
Nice,
are
yeah.
going to talk. So.
Yeah, no, I know we're not talking about the proposal right now. I'm happy to go back to the proposal, but we're like, we're in the trenches over here,
Gotcha.
preparing
Okay.
for December 21st.
Bring us back to the proposals if you want.
So excited for that. Yeah. Before
Thanks,
I give the
Dizzy.
mic over to you, Wingman, I think it might be a good time now to drop today's Odyssey code. So the code for today is WWDAO proposal, all one word, lowercase. Shiny's just dropped it in the chat. It'll be there for about a minute before it's deleted. So go claim your Odyssey shards, Wilders. Wingman, how you doing today?
Doing good, thanks. How's it going, Frank and Neil, Dizzy, Black Nick?
What's up, Wingman? How's it going?
Yeah, so I jumped up here originally because Black Nicholson had a good question at the Monday Hangout, but then he jumped up here on the stage. So the question I was going to follow up on was he asked what's going to happen with the wild, basically, after we transfer it over from ETH. So, but Black Nicholson, if you want to jump in and clarify on anything or ask any other questions, feel free.
Yeah, I had a few. That was one of the questions. I actually want to ask. I want to mention a couple things before I get into the proposal about the DAO. I want to ask why DAO, and is part of the reason so you guys can remove yourself from the equation, or?
I mean, the vision has always been to decentralize. I mean, we're big believers in decentralization, and the big idea is that, okay, these virtual worlds are going to become like virtual nation states, and they're going to yield a lot of power, and they're going to yield a lot of economic capacity, as well as the people that are like participating in those economies. And you really need to think about it more like a country than you do a company per se. And then obviously, privacy, freedom, censorship resistance, like having the values and the principles that we believe in encoded. And you kind of do that through decentralization and building that into the protocol. So that's always been the main reason. There is some benefits from like a legal perspective or a liability perspective. I think those are less and less as there's more regulatory clarity that's coming, but there is definitely advantages from that perspective. And yeah, it's an experiment. Like, I think it's just exciting. I think if we can, I think whenever there's something new, there's many ways something doesn't work. There's many more ways something doesn't work than something does work. But when you're dealing with like new technology and you're on the frontier of something, you have an opportunity to experiment and figure something out and be one of the first to figure something out. So I still am a believer in DAOs. I'm still a believer in decentralization. I think the underlying mechanics of how it all comes together is kind of now the stage that we're at of like trying to figure that out. And I think the group that figures that out will have a huge advantage. So for instance, it's like, not only we make a better metaverse than Meta, but if it's governed in a way that's actually decentralized, that's something that's going to be very difficult for them to do. And that gives us a huge advantage.
I guess that kind of makes sense. Do you think the DAO is the best way forward for Wilder World?
Well, I think the challenge is when you say DAO and I say DAO, it's kind of like the word tree or something. It's like, okay, well, what type of tree, what shape of tree, age, location, height, width, whatever the things is. So I think we have a DAO, you know what I mean? But whether it's useful or a distraction, I think just depends on how we set it up. And I think as much as the community is looking at Wilder World, I think Wilder World's also looking at the community to be like, okay, this is an interesting social experiment. Can something like this really work, or can something like this really make sense? And that requires a lot of experimentation, trust. It requires people working together and trying different things. So I think that's kind of the stage that we're at, where we kind of need to determine what the OS is of the DAO, and really what the purpose of the DAO is, and then what the purpose of the DAO is for all of the different industries. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's cool that you could go and you could buy this NFT and you could be part of this, not just collection, but this entire industry. And I also thought what was kind of cool about the proposal is it created activity, it activated the community. There was positive things, there was negative things, but I think the important thing was that like everybody was collaborating and asking questions and thinking and stuff like that. So I think that's the type of, I think as long as it can be constructive, then that's really powerful. If we can have lots of Wilders participating and building Wilder World, I think that's definitely what we want. Basically it has to shift from just the company building everything to where, like, if you think of a city, the government or the people that are actually building, helped put together the city, they end up being a relatively small percentage of everything that's happening in the city. So I think we're kind of just at that point where we need to start opening things up so that the community can really help drive and bring their creativity in, and that will also help from a marketing and a growth standpoint, as well as make the experience more fun.
Is it possible to vote our way out of the DAOs? I know that ain't going to happen because people love this sense that they have control, but
you just sell your wheel.
That's not what I meant. I meant to have Wilder World go with the wonderful people who run it versus the masses who just come and go and I don't trust the masses. That's just me personally. I don't think they're efficient. I think most people don't do things, and aren't in that position and shouldn't be doing it. Otherwise, everybody would be doing it. There are individuals who are really good at certain things, and the majority of people have issues voting. Period.
Yeah, so I think what I would say that you're touching on is what I would call like so in nature you have things that are decentralized where there's like no head, and then you have things that are highly hierarchical where there is clearly a leader. Like if you like I was listening to this thing on studying chimps the other day, and if you remove the alpha chimp, it just goes into complete chaos. Then a new chimp emerges. And sometimes the chimps can be the most powerful person. Sometimes it can be the wisest person. Sometimes it can be the fairest person. Like there's many different types of leaders, but without that, I'm looking at your PFP. I'm like, without some hierarchical structure, you're absolutely right. It just kind of descends into chaos. And I think we felt a little bit of that. But I do think on the other hand, though, it can't be like a dictatorship, right? There needs to be a balance. And so my hope for the DAOs after this process would be like, okay, where can they provide insight, provide value, be doing certain things, but they're there as a support structure and like a check and balance, as opposed to they're going to go, start coding or something like that.
And then I guess assume
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you, but I think it's like it's a both, and it's like finding a balance.
It's like like a hybrid. I feel like you kind of need someone who's driving and which is kind of like how we run our teams internally, and everyone's contributing, but everyone has different layers in which they contribute and responsibilities, and so there is a benefit.
Not to cut you off, but I think part of the issue is that when people come into this, I don't know if they even come into it for a DAO. They're not thinking of that. I mean, I bought wheels because they were the coolest NFT that I saw at the time when you guys launched them, and then I started getting into it more and more. But I think if people come into it, first off, a lot of people are here for money. Some people are here for the experience. Some people are going to pretend like they're here for the experience, but they're here for money, and they're here for money. So if people aren't here for the same thing, are they actually working together? Is it, people competing? It's just, I just think people aren't even sure what they're doing in their own lives, in their own situation. And then you come to this and, they don't have any idea. I mean, I love that you're talking about switching the ETH for the price of wild. I didn't even think of that at the time. So that actually makes a lot of sense. And then one more question. So the DAOs, I'm assuming, are going to incur taxes, correct?
Yeah, just to agree with, to level with you, like I there's not one thing you're saying that I don't disagree with. So the question is then, okay, well then how do you, what's the right balance basically? But everything you're saying is totally valid.
I like the team so far. I mean, maybe it's not 100% perfect. I'm sure you're still finding your way through it, but I like what the team's doing so far. And I think I mentioned this the other day in the Hangout. I said, I think many people are surprised with what you come with. I even think you guys are surprised with how it's turning out. I don't even know if you thought it was going to be this good.
We did, but there's you go through ups and downs where you're like, you're like, you think it's going to be great, and then you're like, oh fuck, we have to actually, this is going to be way harder than we thought. So there's a lot of that.
And so the DAOs will incur taxes, I'm assuming, correct?
The DAOs,
tax liability.
There's no, they make royalties basically. So I guess you could kind of think of that as tax.
Well, I'm just saying, no, I just wonder if the DAO will have a tax responsibility to have to pay the government something, or, I guess there's different, I don't know where the DAOs
I
are
don't
actually.
think so. I think if it's decentralized, then there's no jurisdiction basically.
The US, but we'll see.
The way that sort of trickles down to us, unfortunately, for some of us in the US is some people.
You guys are going to pay the taxes? Is that what you're worried about?
Well, some people actually interpret it in this way, and I don't know, I'm no expert or whatever, that, as being a part of a DAO, you could be potentially liable for, your share, saying you owe 1% of the DAO, you might be potentially liable for, that percentage of the taxes, but the DAO itself wouldn't technically be liable. And I'm definitely no tax expert, but that's definitely a discussion that I've seen people have that are much smarter than me. So
interesting. I didn't even think of it being personal. I just figured as an entity receiving money. I don't know how things work around the world, but I know a US wants every cut of anything it can get its hands on. If money was received into a wallet or any type of thing, I would think that would incur some kind of interest of wanting to get paid. Yeah. I guess that's not what's most important now. My question was, though, outside.
No, it's a valid point. It's a valid point. There's a lot of uncertainty. I'm actually very bullish on U.S. regulatory, like U.S. regulatory right now. I think is going to be really strong for crypto. I think it's going to open up a lot personally. I'm as optimistic as I ever have been about fair regulation for these things.
And then, so my question about the proposal was essentially just how were the funds going to be split? That was my thing. I haven't voted yet, and I asked for an AMA. I'm sure others did too, just because I was like, okay, we're going to switch into Wild, but then what? Because, like, personally, just from my personal standpoint, I can't play the game, so I wouldn't be able to collect anything from the game. So I guess my biggest interest would be staking at this point. So I'm curious, like, what's the breakdown for staking versus playing? And then also, this was something I just recently became aware of, is non-holders are also going to be able to earn, which I thought initially they were just going to be able to play for fun and you had to hold in order to earn. So I'm curious also how that works.
Yeah, so this is kind of why just to kind of like preface everything, if you go back to Metropolis or different talking about the Wheels DAO, it was always, I remember saying this a lot last cycle, it's progressive decentralization. It's going to decentralize in stages. The company has a right to overturn certain decisions. I think we're kind of like exiting that period and now going into the more full DAO period, but it's going to be a gradient. It's not like we wake up and everything's being done fully decentralized. Ultimately, it's trying to find alignment with everybody and go through a process that people feel is like fair and transparent. And that's kind of what we're in right now. The biggest challenge with the DAO is that it becomes like extractive, right? Where people are like, oh, I just want my percentage of these tokens or whatever. And they're not actually interested in building the racing game and the cars and, investing into the game to make the game better. My belief is, hey, if we make the game great and we continue to invest and we build out the industries and we do all these types of things, then the DAO is going to be way more successful over time. And so we shouldn't be short-sighted. So there's a lot of things. So that's just kind of like some pre-statement and then kind of like a meta perspective. The reason we didn't put any of that in this proposals is like there's a lot of different opinions. There's a lot of different perspectives. There's a lot of different expectations that people have, some of which are valid, some of which we're not even aware of. And like one thing I've noticed is, somebody can say something and then another person can hear that and then people can get excited and then boom, all of a sudden, an expectation. Sometimes it's our fault. Like we say something and it's either misinterpreted or it changes, and that's totally on us. But another time it can just you get a bunch of people together. What do we do as humans? We create stories, right? So my thinking, so that to me, like the staking is such a critical thing and how the economy works is such a critical thing. So the reason we did that separate is that has to be a separate proposal. And it actually took quite a bit of energy, effort, even put this proposal together, which is relatively simple. So the next proposal that we would work on, and anybody that has a perspective, like if it's better that we should have more of these discussions, which that's sort of what I'm feeling right now, is we have several discussions with the Wheels DAO and we talk about really what is our objective? Like, what are we trying to do? Because even if you're not playing the game, my sense is that you want the game to succeed and your asset is going to be tied into the success of the game. And there's also the discussion of, okay, we need to bring in new players. We need to do new sales. We need to sell more cars. I'm sure there's probably people that are like, oh, I never thought you guys would ever sell a car again. It's like, okay, we're building a racing game. What are we going to have 6,000 players? You know what I mean? So I think we need to basically, yeah, that would be the next proposal, is figuring out how the staking rewards will work, how the in-game rewards work, what the balance is there, and then kind of deciding on the long-term revenue of the game, basically, for Wheels, and what is going to happen with Wheels. There's parts, there's all these different elements of Wheels that we have. So it's getting all those things underway. But starting
the one thing that I guess my concern, and I was hesitant, I just wanted to kind of hear this before voting, but being that the switch, my concern was this, is that we're voting for something that we don't know what it's going to be. So are we locking ourselves into something without knowing the full trip, if that makes sense? But I don't even have a concern with that because switching ETH to Wild at this point is actually a really good move.
And that's why we did
even
that.
If we don't go beyond that, it's a good move. So I'm okay with doing that. But I personally didn't like that the vote was being put out without having more information and locking ourselves into something you understand what locking ourselves into a certain road or trip without understanding the destination. But I think it's fine based on the trade makes a lot of sense.
That
Yeah, but
makes
I mean,
sense. It's
yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
another thing too is the proposals have to be highly specific, because once, like, we're discussing a specific issue right now, so it's actually easy because there's something in the center which we can all coordinate around. But once you introduce, oh, there's staking rewards, and oh, do wheels holders versus not, like, there's actually no conversation to be had at that point. So we did include, through kind of working through the proposal, a lot of those things were in there, and it was like, okay, well, it's just everyone's going to be off having different conversations about different things. So the main thing here is it's kind of being coordinated with, okay, this is step one. Like, we kind of need to ensure the faucets and the sinks, and that the wheels economy has the ability to allow players to earn based on the wheels earnings. And then it's like, okay, from here, we need to go, how should this actually be broken down based on player versus non-player, based on staking versus mid racing, so on and so forth. So I think these are like the conversations that the community should actually be having off the back of this, and what one of the biggest takeaways will be. But yeah, what were you going to say, Neo?
Well, I was just going to say, like, again, if you go back to it, the expectation from our perspective is that the Wheels DAO and all the other DAOs would contribute to building out those industries and paying for those industries, and those industries would become their own autonomous units, basically. And that's not really what's happened yet. It's like the company pays for everything, and then the benefit is kind of going to the DAOs. So that obviously doesn't work and has never been the intention. So, but we recognize that there's a lot of things that are not obvious, that are not clear, and so our simplest thing was like, well, whatever, like let's just do a swap, because then it's kind of like we don't have to, we could have put in a proposal that just was like, hey, here's what we have to pay Epic, here's what we have to pay for this, here's what we have to pay for that. And I do feel, based on what we had said in terms of, hey, the company has final say until it decentralizes, we're going to decentralize progressively, the DAOs will be responsible for building and funding the industries to build out those game modes. I feel like we could have done that, and I would have felt like ethically like there's nothing wrong with that, but it didn't feel, the vibes would be off. And I think what we wanted to do is just like instead do the opposite, like reward people, say, hey, we know that this has been a long, challenging road, and especially like the prices have got I think they're doing pretty good compared to most NFTs, but if you bought it above the current price, I think a lot of people probably did. So it was just a way of aligning incentives and coming up with something where it's like, like, sure, this is like, everything you're saying is valid, but okay, like we just need to kind of move, and we'll figure that out next, kind of thing. And you're getting a good deal, so who cares, kind of thing. Like, that was kind of the rationale, I guess, from our perspective.
Well, I want to say thank you, and I appreciate the time, and I think you speaking here and you and your brother speaking here is very helpful, and probably to everybody in the space to hear it. So thank you.
Yeah, no, really appreciate your questions.
Awesome.
Yeah, really good questions. And I'd say, and on these other stuff, like, one of the things just coming out of this right now is like, we should have a meeting like this, or we should have a forum like this. Again, we have to figure all this stuff out. It's like, you figure it out, it's obvious once you figured it out, but it should be like, okay, we have, part of our worry is like, hey, you say something and then everybody freaks out because they don't have the information. So maybe we need like a social contract that says, hey, we're going to be able to say, hey, because if we had to just, without writing a proposal, if we just said, hey, like, we're thinking of this, maybe some people would have thought that was a bad idea or whatever. So we basically need to agree on a format where we can come together, we can kind of say what we're thinking, what we're seeing from inside the companies, throw ideas around, and then the proposal can kind of begin to take shape. And then like a working group gets together, goes and starts to build that and gets consensus. And then by the time the proposal gets launched, there's been a lot more consensus alignment input, so that it doesn't feel like the proposal just got dropped on you or something like that.
I'd actually want to ask if you guys could just do more AMAs in general, maybe like a monthly one, just because there's just so much going on. It's so complex, it's so big, and I think when we get to hear the two of you speak about it, it just becomes more clear and understandable.
100%. So we've been talking with, we're going to really start to, so we've been obviously in build mode, but we're going to get into sales mode, basically, like getting out there and doing podcasts, doing AMAs. Like, this is pretty much the advice that everyone has given us in terms of marketing. It's like they want us to be more out there on podcast spaces, conferences, like whatever we need to do to get the word out. So we're going to start very aggressively, especially post December 21st, like really getting out there a lot. And we can do that now because we have, we feel like the product is there and the team is there where we can spend time on that. And there's not going to be any issues. But yeah, we're about to go into full, it's like make the record, tour the record kind of thing.
Thank you. And thank you, Black Nicholson. That last question came up quite frequently, so thank you for raising it. And we do have one more type 1 question which follows on from that. And then just want to be conscious of everyone's time, as we're now about 20 minutes over the event. Barry Bieber asks, do we have an expected timeline for the subsequent steps 2 and 3, and how might delays affect the overall strategy?
I think we don't have a timeline for it, but I think the intention would be to start working on it right away. And obviously, like, we knew that through this process we'd learn a lot of things, and I think there's a bunch of things on the process side we want to do. So I think the best thing we could probably do is have some number of people, maybe there's a process or something like that where there's like a subgroup that gets elected from the DAO that can kind of represent people's interests that people trust and maybe share different perspectives. I think establishing some sort of working group within the DAO of, like, I don't know, between 3 and 6 people would be extremely helpful. And then they can work with somebody on the company side that can begin to do this. Because even this proposal, like, took a lot of my energy. It took a lot of Frank's energy thinking through a lot of this stuff and trying to be thoughtful about stuff. So what we want to do now is use this as an opportunity to, like, have the community engage more and helping with this. And then we'll help provide resources in terms of pushing it through. But it has to be a bit of a collaboration. And then through that collaboration, I think we'll learn. To me, this is like a huge experiment. Like, it's like a learning experience. So we can actually figure out, okay, what tools do we need? What tech do we need? What governance do we need? Where do we need to be in terms of what decisions are the companies making? What rights do the DAO holders have? And then as we go through that process, we basically then start to upgrade the DAOs with a kind of a constitution and way of working that makes sense and kind of deals with all the issues that Black Nicholson came up with earlier. So the answer is, yeah, we don't have an exact timeline, but there is a sequence and then, steps and stuff like that. So I think the next step for us would be to meet internally about it and then make an announcement about it, and probably start with like some sort of process to establish a working group that can help with this. And there's a million questions, like, would that group be paid? Would they be volunteering? What's the expectation? What's the process for selecting these people? Is it an informal process? Is it a formal process? But the good news is, like, once we establish that process, we can use it for all of these things, which will ultimately allow more decisions to be made and stuff like that.
That's great. And yes, there is a lot to discuss. All very exciting stuff. All right. Well, does anyone have any final questions for Frank and Neo? Now's your chance. Okay, well, I think it's a good time then to close out the event. Thank you, Wilders, for joining us today. Thank you so much, Frank and Neo, for being here to answer everyone's questions. The community always loves to hear from you guys. This event has been recorded and the playback will be dropped in the playback channel. I'll also post the winner of the random Typeform draw for 369 Wild with that recording. We're going to summarize all the FAQs from today and add them all to the Wilder wiki page. Reminder that voting closes this Thursday, November 21st at 11:25 a.m. PT. If you're a Wills holder and you haven't yet voted, you can head over to Snapshot and cast your vote before the deadline. I'll post the link to that here as well as the wiki page. And yeah, please just continue to submit any other questions and we'll make sure that they get answered.
Can I say one more thing, Kaspa? So one thing that we really want to do is, like, our biggest challenge as a project is marketing, basically. I think everybody knows that. We've done some good work there. I think there's been a lot of really good work there, but also, like, in terms of where we want to be, we're not there. And we all know that. And this cycle is really, I think we're going to have something that is truly incredible that you can share to somebody, and it's like unequivocal in terms of what this is and the power of it and how exciting it is. Like, I think we'll have the receipts, you know what I mean? Like, it'll be undeniable. I think the best thing we could use the DAOs for is figuring out a way to basically build out like a guerrilla marketing force, sales force, KOLs, and find out how do we use these resources, and how do we use the community that is here that believes in it as the foundation, and how do we all work together to just create the best community ever, basically. If you look at a lot of the stuff happening with memes and stuff like that, they're winning because they have really strong communities. There's a lot of stuff that's community led, and so that's my biggest curiosity. So if everybody could think about that and could figure out, like, how do we take all the energy that we have everything ready to go, but we need to figure out how to get this out there, how for people to hear about it, and it is our biggest challenge. So if we can all work together to do that, and then if we can direct our resources in a way to help solve that, and we can collaborate on that, I think it could have like a transformative effect. So I'll leave people with that in terms of a challenge, and in terms of something that we want to really start to pursue right away.
If I could say one more thing so far as the DAO thing, I just saw what Stonkmaster was saying in there. I kind of wanted to mention this anyway. The DAO Council idea has been thrown around for quite a while. Some of the guys in Gala, particularly Dude and Stonkmaster, have already prepared a document about, potential ideas and stuff. And I know that they made attempts to try and get this type of information over to you guys. I don't know how far along that ever got and passed down the chain and things like that. But it's definitely something that people in the community that are already behind the idea and pretty passionate about it. And some legwork has already been done. So just to make sure that's on you guys' radar.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I think we absolutely do it. That's my vote. And I think now there'll be more energy for it, because decisions are starting to get made. And then if we can start to do things like marketing proposals and stuff like that, and ways of growing the community, then there's decisions to push through.
I was a little bit disheartened when I saw some of you guys' comments about the fact that there had never been any DAO proposals. I know that there had been multiple proposals that we tried to submit, not directly through the platform, but through the team. I know Greeny had worked on one. I know Dude and Stonkmaster worked a lot on some different proposals. Not only just like the council ideas, but there are some ideas of trying to execute a wheels for wolves swap and things like that. So where the wheels DAO could have gotten land and things like that I feel like never really got like their true. I don't know. They never really. I don't know if they ever really got truly considered. And, it's too late for some of them, honestly. But
yeah, I was literally advocating that we should do that wheels holders should have built trinities and all of that. But I think it's probably just. Yeah, there's just the communication lines aren't there, and there's
exactly.
There's so much going on.
What can we do to improve that? And I know you guys are busy as hell, and it's nothing.
Well, I think we try and I think we just try and solve this now, and like get it to a point where it can kind of run. I think that's the test. Like, can we do that basically? So, I think now is the time, and the energy's there right now to try and structurally solve some of these things. And then if we structurally solve them, then we don't need to be in. Or Frank and I don't need to be part of or we can read the proposal as a participant, or we can give feedback on it, but we're not having to drive the process. And so
exactly, I think like with the swap thing, it was like, oh, this is a cool idea, but it would have to be, physically executed by the team somehow. And, when we looked at it from like a technical aspect, we're like, can this even happen? And that was why we tried to like go through the team for these types of things. I guess looking back on it, we should have just started throwing out proposals and just see where things landed. Through the DAO process, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think pushing a proposal formalizes it, so it's a good idea to like just create the proposal, because everyone has the right to create a proposal. But the new DAO system is fully decentralized, where the team couldn't do anything even if they wanted to. And so Wheels is not on there yet, but Land is on there. So that'll also be kind of interesting. Awesome, everyone. Yeah, no, thanks so much.
Right,
thanks Wilders.
Take care.
Alrighty. Here's everyone. Thanks for coming out. Thanks, Caspa.